to another episode of the Color in Cannabis podcast. Today's guest is a good friend of mine, Jason Washington, someone who's very, very impressive in the cannabis space. Someone I was actually very intimidated by when I first met him because you have so much energy and passion around all of this. It always reminds me I should be working harder, but super excited to have you here.
Man, I'm super blessed and thankful to be here, T. It's a real honor, man, to get the opportunity to sit down and kind of talk about some of the war stories.
Yeah. You got a lot of them.
Yeah.
First, you got a lot of different brands. So let's get into all the brands that you own, and then we'll get into your full story.
Yeah. So, Kulture Inc. is our parent company. Mm-hmm. It's the main brand that everything kind of sits under. Mm-hmm. It's the umbrella. And under Kulture, we've just released a clothing line. Mm-hmm. That's been exciting and a whole new language to learn, if you will. And then under Kulture, from a consumer forward-facing brand perspective, we have Pop, which is plants over pills, and that's our ace of indoor smalls. They come in a pill-like container.
Yeah, you want to grab
yeah, like one of these guys.
Yeah, those are great. I love these.
A unique pill container, and they're in 5 colors. These are the colors that we have now: purple, red, blue, yellow, and green. Mm-hmm. And cannabis flower, just, it's visible from the clear part.
Yeah.
It's smell proof. It's child proof. These little bump stops prevent it from like rolling off a flat surface. And the whole ethos of the brand is just to spark a thought in people's heads. Like, let's try plants and get away from the pills, because here in the Bay Area, all over this country, really, but we have this opioid and this fentanyl addiction pandemic, and that's the real pandemic, right? Yeah. So natural plant medicine is something that we're really a proponent of, and are trying to, kind of be more of a mission-based cannabis business. Mm-hmm. I think I've definitely been in the profit-based cannabis side of business before, and we'll get into that later, and that led me to some time in federal prison, but now it's more about a mission and how can you kind of affect the community in which you live. Mm-hmm. Because I don't like walking down the streets and seeing zombies and seeing, my kids have to deal with looking at that shit. It's a different, when we grew up in Oakland, it was dope fiends and crackheads, but what we see now
it's different.
Is very different. So plants over pills, mission-based cannabis business. What we're trying to do is create a scholarship fund to send people to inpatient treatment, not just outpatient, because you leave the treatment facility, now you're back outside in the same environment you left. So we're really working hard at that. We need all the support of retail shops and consumers to support the brand, because all of then the proceeds from that effort will go towards a scholarship. We have a T-shirt drive for it. I mean, we're trying to do our part. And then also another brand that we have under the Kulture umbrella is called Flower, and I don't have any of it here. I'm sorry, but Flower, FLWR. What we designed Flower around was sustainability for female farmers in the space. And so right now, shout out to Jen. She has 2 outdoor farms. And they're taking the lead with Flower in California, and they just did they had a big booth down in LA at one of the trade shows down there. I forget the name of it. Mm-hmm. But it was beautiful. And Flower, it's what Flower is. It's an eighth of flowers in a box, and then the top comes off, and then the bottom opens up into a flower, which is your rolling tray.
Oh, nice.
So you can be in your car, everything's contained, and it's also speaks to like a woman, a female, as a flower. Yeah. And so beautiful. That's the notion behind Flower. And those are the main 2 focuses. We have the Creating Culture show, which we filmed in 10 different countries around the world. That we should hopefully be releasing here soon. And then we have the Dope Conversations podcast that I'm looking forward to doing with Evelyn LaChapelle,
awesome.
Who served some time in federal prison also. And so we'll be able to talk not only about weed, but just we can have a dope conversation about what school your kids go to, things like that.
That's good. I know you have like a long history in cannabis. You've done a lot of different things, worn a lot of different hats in different states. But how did this all get started? Or I guess beyond cannabis, like tell us about your life, how you got started, and then all the different places you've gone with cannabis.
Yeah, so I guess I grew up here in the Bay Area, right? Born and raised in Oakland. My mom's from Berkeley, so I've got a lot of ties to Oakland and Berkeley. God, I got to cannabis after I guess, I don't know, a long road and an entrepreneurial spirit that burns pretty bright still. But post high school, I went to junior college and played football, and then I got a scholarship to a Division I in Ohio, and I was behind a Heisman candidate, so I transferred to the University of Montana. And fourth game of the year, Montana, I ended up getting hurt, and so at that time, 2005, you could buy real estate, stated income, stated asset. Just show up, you got a pulse. Fill out an application, you get out. So what I did at that time is I bought 5 houses, and I rented all the rooms out to my teammates because guys would like complain, like get evicted for having parties, things like that. But I just rented all the rooms out to my teammates, and then I from there, after I got hurt, I started my first business, which was, there was a show on TV at that time called Pimp My Ride.
Yep.
And in Montana, there was no shops doing anything like that.
I can imagine there wasn't.
So one thing I noticed about people in Montana, though, is they studied what was on TV. They tried to emulate that, and they'd always like kind of, and I guess it goes beyond Montana, really around the world. People like look to California as like the influencer of whatever's cool for social norms of or anything.
Culture, yeah.
100. So so I started my first shop. Opened this chain of car audio and accessory shops, rims, tires, stereo, shit like that. I had 3 of them across the state, and we blew it up. And I was still in school, right? So my shoulder I'm on a medical red shirt, and now everybody's like, "You got a business," but this was before like what they have now with NIL and name, image, and likeness. So I had a full business. Still, I'm in school. I am on a medical red shirt from my shoulder surgery. My shoulder's completely rebuilt. I mean, it was crazy. And so after I graduated in 2008, fast forward 2 more years, one of my teammates was like, we really should get into this like medical cannabis. Like we could really make some money. And he was still playing football at that time. And I was just pretty apprehensive, man, like the show The Wire was on at that time. So it's like black guy from Oakland with, you want me to do weed? And I got the rim shops. Like, let's just fall right into the stereotype. Yeah. But then when I sat down and I put numbers to the cannabis business at that time, I didn't see a pathway to become a millionaire from selling stereos. You could have a good life, but dreams and aspirations far exceeded what I thought the stereo shops could have done. Looking at other people that had been in the stereo business and had 4 or 5 stores and like what their kind of situation looked like from the outside, not knowing, I just didn't see it. So I said, fuck it, let's go. And 24 years old, I started Big Sky Health was the name of my business with $3,000.
Wow, a dispensary?
Dispensary 1. And
that's insane, because the idea of opening a dispensary on only $3,000 now.
On $3,000. Yes. My rent was $450 a month.
Oh, Jesus, gotta love Montana.
On the main drag, right? And I bought my first pound of weed. It came through an introduction from actually one of my stereo reps. He was like, "Hey man, you should talk to my boy Darren, who just sold his stereo shop. I think he's getting into this." And me and Darren became very good friends, and he ended up one of my co-defendants, stand-up guy, good guy. And so from $3,000, we grew that business. I was the largest provider in the state of Montana. It was a caregiver model at that time. And I had 5 stores across the state. So ran that from September 2009, like end of September, October 2009, to November 2011 when I got raided by the feds, DEA, FBI. They simultaneously raided 16 locations of mine, any business affiliated to me, the dispensaries, the stereo shops, my office downtown, my accountant's office, my attorney, my son's mother's house, my house. Like they hit all my houses. They couldn't hit my houses where they didn't have jurisdiction or prove, so they couldn't hit my house in Vegas. They couldn't hit my place in the country because they couldn't prove any connection to those. They tried. And they have the civil asset forfeiture, which ultimately trumps it all, and so led to me having to sell all those assets.
Jesus. So how much were you making when you had those 5 clubs up and running at one time versus like your other businesses?
Yeah, so from the cannabis, at my worst month, I made $100,000 a month. That's like a bad month. Yeah. Once we scaled it up, right? Like not straight out the gate, but you could see a steady growth every week. And it just became, who was able to supply their patients? It was this war of attrition. You've got an environment of people who don't know how to grow weed, who've never grown weed, and the climate does not cooperate with you growing weed. So what I did was I went to San Diego. I got my head grower came from San Diego, who I had been doing it for a while. And the patient cards is what would protect you. So 6 plants per patient. Yep. So what it became is this war of like patient card caregiver registrations, because the amount of cards you own is like your power in the market. Yep. Right. So we would go to these like traveling doctors clinics, and we would pay for your doctor visit. If you couldn't afford it, or you were a veteran or low income and you needed medical cannabis, you become a Big Sky Health patient, and doctor right there on the site, sign you up, and there you go. And so that's what we did. And that's how we were able to get the patient count up. Ultimately, everything alleged in their applications for search warrants from the DEA, for my phone taps, for the 24-hour surveillance they had on me, none of that was proven at trial. Jesus. Because I'm from Oakland, California, and they had my phone taps. At that time, both of my brothers were in the space here in Oakland under 215, and they were active, and they'd give me the game. They'd tell me what's going on and this and that, but they thought that there's some connection to a trafficking organization from California to Montana, and it just wasn't the case. If it were, I would have went to prison for 10 years.
So how did they get on to even bothering you? Was that you were too successful in the space and someone started complaining?
I was the only black provider in the state of Montana.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Former Grizzly quarterback, and I'm the largest. So when you go from the DEA's perspective, going through the discovery, and what they did was they went and contacted the state of Montana. Now, which is, if the federal government doesn't recognize any form of medical cannabis, why would you then reach out to the state of Montana? Why not just come raid me? Well, they do that so then now they can, for my charging documents, right, they can allege and prove that it's now a worthy target because I have 1,001 plants. Because on the it all ultimately goes on what they can charge you, right? Your plant count helps them charge you at a higher rate. Absolutely. Because now that's going to forego you and require a mandatory minimum sentence. And so I think that's it, man. Look, I'll tell you too, I was loud about it. There was no, look, at that time, I had just played for the University of Montana. I was a Montana resident. I owned property there. I was a Montanan. Like, I was in, right? I'm making all this money in Montana. At that point, I don't give a fuck. Yeah. It's Montana way to fucking flag for all I care at that time. And so under Montana law, I was 100% legal. Had I not been, we would have been shut down a long time ago. And so I think all those factors, you can't fly private planes and shit like that into Montana and then not go. These motherfuckers think you bringing Escobar loads up there or something. It's just crazy. So, but look, that's just in me coming from here. And until you've had that type of money at 24 years old, first off, I'm coming off the wave of the quarterback football hype. Then I have another win when we pop off the car audio shops. So it's like I have a loss when I get hurt, but then I have a win on the car audio shops. So it's just like you just kind of intertwined into a lot of shit. And then I have a major win on the weed, and now it's like, okay, you can take care of mom's good. Yeah. Moms don't need nothing. Mom's got a little credit card, little issues going. All that's done. Yeah. You know what I mean? Everybody, it's just done.
It must have felt good.
To be able to take care of and be the youngest sibling out of all your siblings, but now it's Jay got it and it's good. It's egotistical, but it's also what's been ingrained into my brain, and flexing and flossing and doing all of that shit, popping bottles and jewelry and going to the jeweler with, you know, the backpack of $100,000 and being able to put that on the table and actually do it. Like, not dream about it. This has been done. Yeah. Now, I tell you, here we sit here in 2023, for 14 years later, I have a Casio. You can't pay me to pop a bottle of nothing. I'll pop a bottle of milk for the baby, and that's about it. Like, you couldn't, I don't give a fuck. If you gave me $100,000 and said, Jay, go to Vegas and do this, I would say, thanks, T, for the money. I'm going to Vegas, but we ain't spending none of this, right? The goal is what we coming home with. So, you know, for me, it was a lesson learned. Had I never done it, I wouldn't be able to say. But until you've done anything, it's hard to, when you growing up, I mean, you know, your mama tell you, don't do this, don't do that. Until you go and do it and either are successful or injure yourself, you still got to do it. You got to learn for yourself. So I can say that I did it. It was a great time of my life. Being able to know and learn the lesson and value of $1. Now, as we sit here, compared to what life was back then, life in the fast lane is intoxicating and it's sexy, man. It just is. Yeah. And it all comes with it. Everything that you see in the movies and, you know, the girls and the cars and the pretty things and the experiences, and it's a lot of access that comes with that. So
how long did you wind up having to sit down versus how long did they want to sit down for? And how long did you actually wind up being locked up for?
So I was indicted on 3 counts. Conspiracy with the intention to distribute, obviously, and possession with the intent to distribute, and conspiracy to produce marijuana, and possession of a firearm and furtherance of drug trafficking. Now, let's talk about the firearm. I was registered in Montana, concealed carry permit. Now, again, back to this, I'm a Montanan, I'm following Montana law. I don't even know at that time, I was so ignorant, I didn't even know federal law was different. I didn't know there was a federal, some sort of crossover and they don't respect each other or talk. I'm thinking, look.
The law is the law.
The law is the law, right? Your mama tells you you can have a cookie, and then your daddy comes home and whoops your ass for taking a cookie out the cookie jar. You're like, she just told me it was good. What? Like, what? Yeah. So that's the way it felt. So indicted on the gun and the two weed charges. I didn't get any money crimes, probably because they seized all the money. But those were the 3 I went to trial on. And the reason I went to trial is because, look, at that point, I understood that I had a son. I was man enough to sell weed, to take. I knew the risk. Yes, of course, we knew the risk, but I was man enough. So I wanted to do that as an example to my baby, to say, look, when you're convicted in something, now I'm following state law. Now, I could have tapped into my brother and them out here and the whole shit, and it would have been double or triple of what it was actually going on up there, right? Other than what it was. But the fact that we were following Montana law to the T, it's not my fault that you guys came up with a program that was a little loose and we just took advantage and put the gas on that shit. Yeah. So the reason I went to trial was, at that time, I felt like my son was a big part of my my confidence and my reason and my why. And I wanted to be an example for him and for my children. When you're convicted in something, meaning you're providing medicine for patients. Oh, I come from the patient space, right? I don't come from this. There was no designer weed. There was no pretty bags and packaging and shit. I come from people coming in having emotional breakdowns after chemotherapy, looking for some sort of treatment. I come from moms who have children with epilepsy and all of these things that this plant can help with, saying, oh my God, thank you so much for being here, because now I don't have to look in the streets for shady characters in order to make some can of butter for my chow. That's where I come from.
Yeah.
So I felt that I was a Montanan following Montana law, and I was doing right by the patients. And I felt the patients was going to fuck with me, because we always fuck with them. If you didn't have something and you needed something, you could come in there and I would make sure you left with something. If you had $4, you were going to leave with something to help you out. Even if we got to run a little credit for you, whatever, no problem. That's why my patients stayed so loyal to us, because it wasn't just about the money. The money's going to come when you're doing right.
Absolutely.
And that's why I felt so good about it. And that's also why I was unapologetic about how I spent my money, because I knew we were providing and we wasn't breaking no rules.
Yeah.
I just went and got the dream team. Yes, my head cultivator was from California. That's not my fault.
Yeah.
That every other provider in the state of Montana didn't think, let me go where and get the Michael Jordan out here and let's really go. And so that's just what I did. And so indicted on those 3 counts. My indictment was superseded 3 times, meaning that they get the initial indictment, and then the superseding indictments are just the add-ons, right? They're just trying to like continue to throw more shit. They wanted me to plea out.
Absolutely.
Right. So my first plea started at 20 years. Then it went down to 17. And then it just kind of started to trickle down. Day before, and now we fought them pre-trial for 18 months. When you're fighting the government, what you learn is they don't run out of time or money.
Yeah.
I do.
Yes.
Right. I did. And so it was like, man, it's go time. So went to trial on those 3. We beat them on the gun. We were not denying any of the weed because we have business licenses.
Yeah.
So what we wanted a jury to know and see was, look, we're full accountability and ownership here. You know, the director of the Montana Medical Marijuana Program fully on our side. Like, these guys are a model for what we want this program to be. And, you know, the jury instruction was written that says, even if you feel Mr. Washington was compliant with state law, under federal law, the cultivation, sale, distribution of marijuana is illegal. Therefore, you must, bold, underline, find him guilty. Now, if you're a juror who knows nothing about jury nullification or just doesn't know that I could just not vote, and then they'll get a hung jury, what are you gonna do? You're gonna vote guilty.
Yeah.
And when in the interview process after post-trial, these people were like, we had no idea that we could just not vote because this is fucked up.
Yeah.
I mean, they were crying. The jurors are crying, right? Because at that time, we didn't know. I mean, look, at that time, I beat the gun at trial. So I was not guilty on that, but I was guilty on the 2 weed charges. And those both carried mandatory minimum sentences of 5 years. Now, not concurrent, consecutive, which means 10.
Yeah.
Okay. So my sentencing judge, he was like he fucked me on the jury instruction, because had he not
Put that line in there.
they might have been like, all right, well, there's some wiggle room, we can get out of this. But he was my saint, because he, under federal law, should have went to prison for 10 years. In his sentencing memorandum, he wrote a very long explanation of why he did this, which my sentence was ultimately appealed by the prosecution, not me. And he said, you didn't prove anything of any of these allegations in these applications for search warrant. You got wiretaps, phone taps, 24-hour surveillance. You've spent $3 million of government money finding what I could find if I drove down Reserve Street. We got a store with a sign on it, and we got patients. Big fucking deal. What do we got? He said, if I could send you home today, I would. I wouldn't send you to prison. He said, I have to send you I have to. And so he gave me a year on each count. I got 2 years.
Oh, Jesus. That's great.
So 2 from 10 was good. Now
2 from 10, they could have been like 20 or 50 if the government had their way.
Absolutely. Yeah. No doubt. If I were in another jurisdiction, so this judge I had was an Obama appointee from Stanford. So he's California based, just got appointed. I was like his second trial. So it could have went way left or way right. Had I been in another jurisdiction in Montana, they had this federal judge out there named Judge Haddon. They call him Hang'em Haddon because he maxes you all the way out. Yeah. Right? Like he gave a dude 40 years that I was in transit with for having a pound a week. Jesus. And it's just like, fight your way out of it. We don't give a fuck. Yeah. So I was blessed from that aspect. Judge Christensen really rocked with me because he heard it. Mm-hmm. At this point now, I've been in trial and been in sentencing. This has been two years of his life, right? So he was just like, I've sat on this case. It's time to move on. So anyway, so the prosecution, by definition, is correct. Mm-hmm. So they appeal me to the Ninth Circuit here in San Francisco. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is in the city. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals says, by definition of federal law, you got to go for 10. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to resentence you. They have the authoritative ability to resentence you. Mm-hmm. We're going to send it back to the district judge and let him resentence you. Well, at this point, I had already served my time. Mm-hmm. I was back in a community, like in a halfway house in Montana. And that was that judge's pet project. So each judge has a project. Yes. Right? So that was his.
The halfway house.
The halfway house. Yeah. And my attorney's like, we need to request this halfway house because da-da-da-da-da. So I get to that halfway house, and they appeal me, and they take me back into custody. I'm in a county jail. Now, after going from prison to county jail, I'm in a county jail for 45 days. After you've been in prison, which is like, it's cool, to county jail, it's hard. And so I'm in a county for 45 days. My beard's grown out. I look terrible. I'm in orange. Right, going back to court, which is the visual from how I was in court before. Very nice suits every day, dressed to the nine, whole thing. The judge thought I violated. He's like, "Why are you in orange?" We get back to sentencing, and he said, he took his glasses off, and he says, "Are you ready to be resentenced?" Like he's pissed off at me, and he said, "I'm going to reduce the original sentence from 24 to 21 months." And if you want to appeal that, go ahead. He looks right at the prosecutor. She turns bright red. If you want to appeal that, go ahead. And get him out that orange today. And that sent me home. So that cut the rest of my halfway house time, because I had 6 months halfway house time. So I did 14 years behind the gate, and then 14 months behind the gate, 6 months of halfway house time. And then your good time is your other 4 months. So that just sent me right, cut me right, sent me straight to the street at that point. And then what I did, I had a 4-year probation tail. I went back to the University of Montana because they get credits when athletes graduate. I had already graduated with 1 degree in the midst of the car audio shops and whatnot, but I had I had 6 more classes to get my 2nd degree. Mm-hmm. So I went back, talked to the athletic department, Jean Gee. I love her still to this day, will always love her. She always rocked with me my entire time in Montana. I love that lady. They got me to go. I could go back to school, and I didn't have to pay for it. Nice. And I finished my 2nd degree, and I went back to the judge, and I'm like, Judge, I've now finished another degree. I need to move back to California, but I can't. I don't want to move back to California on probation. Yeah. Trying to get a job and shit like that's going to be very difficult. He was like, yep, sounds good to me, and cut it. And then, of course, the prosecution opposed that shit, and he was like, well, what you want to do? Because that's what it is. Mm-hmm. And they didn't appeal that, and I was back home. Got back to Oakland October 2016.
That's quite a journey.
Yeah.
So yeah. How was it coming back home?
So then coming back home, I swore off weed. Mm-hmm. So at that point, what I did was, back up a little bit, I sold my car audio shops to a guy. My store manager, while I was in jail, had embezzled $60,000 from the company, which we found out once I got home. But anyway, I still sold the business, so I left with a little bit of change. Came home and was like, okay, what's my next? I had enough money, like down to the penny, just to pay my rent in the Bay Area for a year.
That's the Bay Area.
And I'm like, man, what's my next move? So I'm talking to my cousin. He worked for Waste Management because when I was in a joint, I was a barber. And when you talk to all the mafia guys who are coming down off their long sentences, they're like, stay away from the fucking drugs. Yeah. The feds don't like the drugs. And you're going to be under a microscope. So I was like, fuck the weed. I got to figure out a move in like sanitation. So my cousin worked for Waste Management. I'm like, man, what do people, and you know, just as an entrepreneur, all we're trying to do every day is solve problems.
Yes.
So I'm like, okay, what do people complain about? And they're like, man, they just put this shit in Oakland called push-pull. I'm like, what the fuck is that? So it's the distance that garbage dumpsters travel from wherever they live within the building to the street to get dumped and then put back. And they're crazy. They're like, you know, $80 per 3 inches type shit. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like thousands of dollars a month. So I started a company called Bin Pool, and we move trash dumpsters.
Okay, so the building would normally have to pay Waste Management to move the big can. So instead of paying that exorbitant fee, you create a business where you just show up and do it for them, and it has to get paid. It has to get done anyway
for half the price.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And so, and the waste
you're going to be successful no matter what you do,
bro. So the Waste Management drivers are like, we love this because now we don't got to get out the truck.
Yeah,
it's raining and shit. They just drive up, stab, dump, and they're off. Now, what that does is they've cut off 7 minutes per 50 stops. Yeah. They get off earlier. They're happier, right? So then they're like, yo, push-pull over here, push-pull over there. Go to this address. They don't want to do all that extra work. Yeah. They don't get paid anything extra for it. So that was the business. So then I ran Bin Pool for a year. Still have it today, 6 years later, and it's great. But ran that for a year, and then the weed, man, the cannabis industry was calling. You know, California was on the verge of going legal, and a buddy of mine, Matthew Morgan, who I had known from Montana, he went off after I got raided and did reef dispensaries and
in Vegas.
In Vegas, yeah. So he did reef in Vegas, and you know, we had a lot of friends out there, man, from those times when I was telling you you're flying down there, and it was good. It was good, yeah. Right? So we had a lot of friends out there, and he was like, "Man, look, let's you're off probation. Let's go to California. Let's build the biggest cannabis brand anybody's ever seen." And at that time, he had 6 reef locations, I believe, through Arizona and Nevada, and we did it. And we went to LA. And we started the brand Ignite alongside Dan Bilzerian was kind of the face of that guy. And we were there for about 7 months, and things just they weren't going. There was a lot of partying and a lot of, like I said before, I come from the patient-based cannabis side of things. This is medicinal. This isn't parties and popping bottles and smoking. Like, it's not.
Yeah, it's not that.
It was different for me, right? So it wasn't authentic to the culture is kind of how I felt about it. So after about 7 months of being there, it was time for us to go. And that was the birth of Kulture. And, you know, in a lot of ways, the reason Kulture came about was because it was just like, nah, this is our culture. And it's not going to be hijacked by shiny objects that raise a lot of money. Yeah. And so Kulture has been it's been here with me since, and it's I think it's it's been a good road. It's taken me to 20 countries around the world. It's been fun, man.
Excellent. So how did you transition from the clothing brand to traveling around the world? I know we talked about it a little bit, but it sounds like you had a lot of interesting projects that you were doing, and I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So with the so when I left Kulture, not left Kulture. I've never left Kulture. We're still here. But when we left Ignite, and Kulture came about, it was now, okay, how do we work with, bring our experience and operational expertise? Because if you remember at that time in the industry, everybody was new who were coming into it, right? Absolutely. There were like legacy dudes who had been in it, And which the preface of culture is like, even down our headshots, half are in the light, half are in the dark. Because for us, like, there's not one picture of me prior to going to prison around anything cannabis related. The only pictures are DEA evidence photos, right? That's it.
Yeah.
So it's for us, it hasn't, there's always been this apprehension, plus this like non-trusting relationship with the government that I still hold today.
Yeah, we have to.
Right. So it was like, how do we now take our expertise on the road, and how do we spread our wings? All of these states are starting to emerge. Like that was the opportunity to really help people sprint out the gate, right? To go and get, like I told you in Montana, I went and got the Michael Jordan of cultivation. That's why I was better than everybody else, is because I had an experienced grower. They didn't. Well, now how do we become that for all of these other people in these other 7 states? So we've built dispensaries, we built cultivation facilities, we built extraction facilities in 7 states and 1 country around the world. And Kulture.Global, I put a .global on that, is because of my experience back with the car audio shops, taking Montana people, looking at a California-based show and wanting that service. With cannabis, this is more of a worldly commodity good, if you will, whatever. How do I take what the globe is going to look at, the epicenter of California, and take that on the road? So I've always made the .global thing. Like the clothing line, there's nothing that says weed on it. There's nothing that says anything great, because I want this piece to be usable in every country in the world. Like, I don't want you to walk anywhere and someone know what that is.
Yeah.
It's almost like you got to be in to know what that is, right? And culture speaks to this word is synonymous with not just weed. Like, cannabis is just a small piece of our daily culture, right?
Absolutely.
Like diversity, what's going on with like the gender roles in America, like all of those things are part of our culture. It's not our grandparents. This is us today. Like, what is us today? And so I felt like culture was something that kind of took all of those pieces in, several things. My children are mixed race. Like, that's a normal thing today. That wasn't a normal thing 50 years ago. So This is all our culture. Cannabis is part of that. And yeah.
It's quite a road. You mentioned earlier about traveling around the world and filming around the world. What projects were you working on doing that?
Yeah, man. So it was interesting. 2020, we were doing a show in response to a Vice Network article that was 20 countries with some sort of existing, emerging, or non-existing cannabis program. And we went out to shoot the first episode, and it was in Nepal, right? Like, rip the Band-Aid right off, right?
Crazy.
Like at that time, I had been to Mexico, Canada. Like, I had never been across the pond, right? So Nepal, first one.
That's gotta be mind blowing. From Oakland to Nepal, or
right?
Oakland to Montana, Nepal. It's
straight out the gate, right? So Nepal was the first one. We shot it. We get back, and number 2 is Spain that year for Cannabis. Now, production crew is there in Barcelona. They're on the ground. We're set to fly out that night. I get a call like 3 p.m. Man, flights are getting canceled. People are stuck. This COVID thing, yada, yada, yada. But it was crazy because when we were in Nepal, I was doing an interview with this kid that owned a trinket store. And he's like, yeah, tourism's down because of the coronavirus. And I turn around and look at the crew, look at production. I'm like, the what? I had never heard of it, right? And so, then COVID just kind of killed that. So since then, we've gone on to shoot 10 episodes around the world. It's called Creating Culture. We like to keep the Ks and keep it consistent. And what we're doing is we are creating this culture.
Absolutely.
Because we're creating it within these organizations and these places that we're touching. And that is what cannabis is also doing.
That's beautiful. So, what are you working on in the future? What do you have coming up?
So my main focus has been the release of the clothing line. I've been working on it for a while.
I love it. You gave me one of these. The design is beautiful. The actual construction of it's amazing. I'm really looking forward to wearing it.
Yeah.
You guys did a really good job with that.
Yeah, good. It's building a clothing line, man, for someone who has no experience whatsoever in that area in that field has been quite the ride. And I'm excited for like collection 2, but this time I want to like go. The first line was the products were made in China, but this time I want to make the products and be more hands-on, and I want to try to go to Vietnam and do it and be on the ground for like 2 months at a time, going through fabrics and materials, because when you're trying to create a clothing line through email and pictures, it's hard. Yeah. I mean, I worked really hard to get it to where it is now, and I think that there's a good product, and you know, it's turned out nice. I'm happy with the way it's turned out, but I always think there's room for improvement.
Absolutely.
You know, and so it each piece, because you had asked me like why are these names on here? Each piece is named after an airport code, and it's associated with that. So the piece that I gave you was the PDX jacket for Portland, and that's like a rain slicker. And it's just classic materials. It's evergreen, grays, blacks, and it'll just whisk water away because that's synonymous, because when you're in Oregon,
it's wet.
Right? It's always wet. So we have LAX, we have MIA, we have LAS for Las Vegas, we have PHX for Phoenix, SFO, OAK, and there's each piece, like I tried to thoughtfully, the JFK, which is probably my favorite from my time in New York, is just the JFK piece is just like a double-lined hoodie. It's just I just really like that piece. But each piece is like speaks to where it's from and why it's there, and there's a connection to that place.
Absolutely. Because I assume there's a website they can buy all these at?
Yep, definitely. It's just Klothing with a K. Klothing by Kulture with a K.com.
All right. Definitely check that out.
Yeah.
So obviously you had a crazy entrepreneurial spirit from the beginning. Like, I don't know anyone who goes to college and then starts buying houses and starts housing people in college. Where'd you get this entrepreneurial spirit from?
You know, I got it on both sides. I got it on my mom's side and my dad's side. My mom's side is more of a blue collar side. My grandpa was a Marine, and from there they got out of the South and they moved to California. And they moved to Berkeley, and then my grandpa was a postal worker, but he also had a side hustle of like recycling materials and trash hauling and things like that, which I grew up on that truck, working on that truck every summer. And my grandpa always said, so all my mom lives on the same block now, but my grandpa always said, control your neighbors. So he bought the 5 houses between my grandma's house, and every time somebody would sell their house, go Dr. Bill Rose, because he would buy it. And so the 5 houses from my grandma's house down to my mom's house were all his. And so that's kind of where I got the real estate entrepreneurial side of things. My sister's still in real estate now. And I don't know, all my brothers and like not me, they all have like real estate, a portfolio and things like that. And then on my dad's side, my dad was born in Alabama. Shout out Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Roll Tide, which is it feels like home for me, man. I really enjoy Alabama. But so my dad's family from Alabama. My uncle played for the 49ers for 9 years in the 70s, and I think stopped in like 81, something like that. But they came out to California. Again, my grandpa was trying to get away from the racist South at that time. And my dad was very entrepreneurial. So my dad had a natural gas and oil company. My dad started the 100 Black Men.
Wow. That's impressive.
Founding president.
Yeah, that's nice.
And my dad was just very entrepreneurial, man, very successful. I'll tell you this one story, which is crazy. So my dad ended up into some shit with the feds too. They fucking feds. Anyway, so my dad ends up with some shit, and all this comes out in what your PSI, your pre-sentencing investigation. And so at the height of my dad's career, we had like a Rolls Royce and a driver and like all this shit. And so my mom loved that car. And my uncle found the car. So my dad died in 2010. But when the feds were on my dad, like he would like hide all his shit and, you know, do all the necessary precautions. So like my mom really loved that car. And she turned 60, I think. It was either 60 or 65 when I was at the height of my time in Montana. And my uncle, just like in conversation, he was like, yeah, man, remember that Rolls Royce, man? Your daddy had the best Rolls Royce or the flyest Rolls Royce in Oakland or something, man. I know who got it. And I bought that car back from my mom and gave it to her on her 60. It was either her 60th or 65th birthday. I can't remember. But I bought it back from that guy and I gave it to her as a present. That's beautiful. And the feds tried to take that fucking car again. And so I was just like, fuck you. Like, it ain't happening. Yeah. And so we had to tuck it away for a little bit. And I just was like, I don't know what to tell you, dog. You barking up a wrong tree. Because I wasn't going to put her through that trauma again. Absolutely. Of having it be taken away and shit like that. You know, like, we were younger, man. Like, the FBI and the whole full SWAT team raided our house looking for my dad and shit like that. So, like, I remember that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like it was yesterday. You know, and I remember my mom, like, yelling at agents to get the fuck out of our house and shit like that. So, like, those things, when it happened to me, it was just kind of like, people were like, weren't you scared? It wasn't that I just didn't feel anything. Because I'm like, it was almost like I've been through this. Yeah, you had, yeah. You know, and so, and then just, like, drawing on that courage from my dad, like, man, these motherfuckers don't got nothing to worry about. We all right. You know what I'm saying? And us still being all right. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like, it's like, damn, they just really came to our house, took all the cars, I'm talking like tow trucks, took all Mercedes, like my dad had the shit. Yeah. When I tell you my dad had the shit, I mean, in, you know, $80 million a year type shit business coming in. Like, my dad was him at one point. And my uncle was playing for the 49ers at the same time. They had the club in San Francisco called, I think it was called Mims or something. I mean, these are some, you know, they was hitters in the Bay. And then they had Wine and Roses right down here, my mom's side. Mm-hmm. So Felix and all them, you know, Felix Mitchell, all the big deep boys OGs, was all tapped into my Uncle Billy, who's my mom's brother, who I guess this is where I get the cars from too, because he 20 cars type stuff. And but these are my examples of who I'm growing up around, right? This is what I'm seeing. So now people are like, man, when you was real flossing and doing it, how I'm real, this is my example. Yeah, yeah. My example is real, like, these niggas is the kings out here. Like, they really running shit and really, like, really got it. Yeah. So what I'm gonna do? I got to just come on a new virgin, right? And so, you know, that's all just ingrained into me, and it's just what it was. And so I got the entrepreneurial side and the hard work side from blue collar side from my mom. So my grandpa had all them houses right across the street from a park. My granny do shit like go rake all the leaves outside. Granny, all the leaves, right? So
this is y'all's block.
Yeah,
so,
for sure. Go rake all the leaves and you eat when you get back. So, you know, those are the kinds of that's why now motherfuckers like, you weigh your own weed out, you do.
Yeah, we should talk about that. Yeah. I go into distro, you're bagging it up, you're weighing it up, you're dropping it off, you're collecting the money. Like, I don't know anyone who's literally doing all of it anymore. I mean, it's insane. I don't know how you do it with all these other businesses, but that's why I said, are you intimidating me? Because you're busy as hell. Every time I saw you, you're working so hard. I was like, I can't possibly work hard enough to keep up with this man. So it's extremely impressive how much you do on your own.
Man, I tell you, the reason that I don't like, so this is why. Mm-hmm. At my trial, I didn't speak for myself. I didn't take the stand. I don't like nobody speaking for me and representing me. If I could do it all over again, no lawyer, maybe I'd have a legal advisor just to say, yes, you can and can't do that. But I need to be able to speak for myself, and I need to be able to represent myself, because nobody is going to tell the story of Plants Over Pills the same way that I can.
Absolutely.
And when you're launching a new brand and these dispensaries are giving you a shot, they're giving you an opportunity to sell your products in their stores, that message needs to come across very clear and concise from the day one.
Yes.
And the stores that hasn't happened, we struggle.
Yeah. Same. If I don't do the staff training myself in a store, hit or miss sales, we wind up out of the store in a couple months. If I actually go there, like immediately as soon as we get it in there, we start off with great sales velocity and just increases over time.
Absolutely.
So the physical presence from either the owner or someone who cares passionately about the mission is critical.
Absolutely. And the problem is, the reason I do it, Taryn, is because, like, to your point, someone who cares. We live in a society where everything is so fucking expensive, especially here in the Bay Area. Pop can't afford to have someone that cares about it to tell the message. So I got to tell the message.
Yeah, you got to keep that price low for everyone so it keeps it affordable.
Exactly. Yeah. Because we get compared to this corporate cannabis shit that's not the same,
yeah,
that doesn't have the same brand ethos behind it, who doesn't have the same care and compassion, who didn't put in the... But at the end of the day, do consumers care?
No, it's a good product, good price. That's all they want.
That's it.
Yeah.
So, look, it's the market we live in, and that's just how we got to roll.
Yeah. It's impressive, though. Very.
Man, thank you.
What how do you feel like, I guess what we talked about with your folks and the entrepreneurial spirit, but just in terms of like ethnic background, how do you feel that your culture that you came from has impacted what you're doing in this space or what you're doing out in the world?
Well, look, just, until I open my mouth, if I'm in another country, you don't know what I am, right?
Absolutely.
Right, even here. I mean, because the Bay Area is so diverse.
Absolutely.
Right? Let's talk like on a micro, immediate level. I'm never white enough and I'm never black enough. That's just what it is. I'm sure you've dealt with some of that shit. Motherfuckers always say, oh, light skin, all the shit, right?
You speak too proper.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so from like my immediate family, like I said, for who my dad and my uncles were, and, these is not my dad, but like some of my uncles, they hijacking trains and doing the Jack London trains and doing the liquor scams and all this shit. I mean, these is back in the day how shit used to run around Oakland, right?
Absolutely.
Which I guess is no different than how shit run around here now. But so it was just be careful. That was the family sentiment. But then when I went down, it was just like, well, you knew what it was, so stand up and take your time, and we ain't no trials, and it's no guilty pleas, and that's just what it is. Did you, do it.
Stand tall on it, yeah.
Exactly. So it didn't even have to really be communicated to me like that, though, because I just felt like if I had done that, then my uncles and everybody would look at me as like, you soft, like you ain't it, like you ain't us. So I just really wasn't with it. And from like on a macro level outside of the community, it's on some levels, and I know you're going to have some other conversations, but on some levels, it's almost helped validate and give more talking points or stripes to the fact of like, man, I went to federal prison for this shit and lost a lot of my life. Like, don't just look at the time sentenced. Look at this as a macro. Like, it took me 10 years probably to rebound from that shit. And probably not even all the way, because had I never had that setback, who knows where we'd be right now.
Absolutely.
Right? But I mean, I went down to zero from having millions of dollars in physical cash, in addition to assets, down to nothing. And so now it's just like the build back. The difference is the build back is harder when you're older.
Yeah.
You don't have the energy and the drive and the piss, because it's almost like you've already done it. Yeah. So now you got to do it again. It's like when you're at the house, you're trying to log into something on the TV and the thing just kicks out your email address and you got to do it. You're just like, oh my God, fucking shit. I got to start over.
Yeah. You got to sign all the way back in.
Yeah. So, it's there's been a good and bad, from me. It's helped me in some ways, but I've never been a part of last prisoner projects or none of that shit. I've always just done me. And that could be a bad thing too. That could be something that's hampered I don't know, but none of them groups have ever reached out to me. And a lot of people that they do be reaching out to or that they represent or they put on Front Street, I'm like, okay, go ahead. You know, so it's just what it is.
That's beautiful. So for folks starting out in cannabis, like what do you have any recommendations or advice for folks who look like us or trying to get in the space? I mean, this is a very different space now than when we got into it, you know, but still, what kind of recommendations would you give folks?
Yeah, I would say what I'd advise you to do is either, if you have no clue, but you just know that you want to be involved, where I feel like I've been successful is I can tell you every piece of every operational process, from planting a seed to extracting material to cultivating to retail dispensing to packaging to touch points of stickering. I can tell you every single thing because I've done it. So if you're looking to get into cannabis, don't come in with a blank slate. Leave everything you quote unquote know, because today's cannabis is different from last. Yeah. Legal cannabis, to operate a legal compliant facility is, and even to work in a legal compliant facility, from the cleanly measures down to security protocols, all of these things that legacy operators really never had to deal with, are a change of the guard. It's all new. And so if you come into the industry now, come in with an open mind and try to learn as many different things as possible before you decide what you want to do.
Absolutely.
So you want to build a brand? Okay. You want to build a flower brand? Okay. Well, do you know how to grow weed? Can you talk about different terpenes to consumers to figure out what needs they may have to be able to make an educated recommendation? Can you do that? No. So you need to start there.
Yeah, get busy.
Right. So that would be, and if you already know, or you think you know what you want to do in weed, I would strongly recommend that then you laser focus and become a resident expert on whatever it is you think you want, you think you know, so that you make yourself irreplaceable on whatever team you want to join.
Absolutely. No, that's great advice. Great advice. Know your work, get your hands dirty, become an expert. Those are all critical things. And especially a lot of new people are kind of missing, as they just want to kind of invest in things without actually doing it.
Exactly.
So that's a good point. It's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jason, for being here. It's been great talking to you. It's great watching you work. It's great like having a brand near your brand, just to inspire me to work harder, grind harder.
Yeah, man. Look, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on, T. I mean, we always have, great conversations, and I'm sure this could go on for hours. But no, I really appreciate it, man. And if you in California dispensaries, man, check out Pop at Plants Over Pills on Instagram. Check out the Kulture clothing line, just clothing with a K, byculture.com, at Klothing by Kulture, or find me on Instagram. You guys know how to work it. It's just Jason D. Washington, and everything is tied and connected there. That's not hard. But look, support the brands. We really appreciate it. We're mission based. It's not just about flexing and making money anymore. It's about affecting a community and helping people to help us.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, brother.
Appreciate it. Thanks, T.